Hello everyone, and welcome to my Days of Our Lives official. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. At the hospital, Fiona poured coffee for an anxious Maggie and Xander as they waited for word on Sarah, who had been in surgery for 5 hours. Maggie blamed herself for what had happened. If she hadn't misplaced the Horton cabin key, Sarah wouldn't have returned to her car to go to the Kiriakis' mansion to help Maggie retrieve it. Xander informed Maggie that the only person to blame was the one driving the automobile that had hit Sarah. After Xander promised revenge on the driver, a concerned Fiona urged her son to think happy thoughts for Sarah. While Fiona flashed back to the instant she'd realized she had hit someone, Kayla arrived with news concerning Sarah. Despite serious internal damage, Sarah's health was stable. Assuming that there's no complications, I think she will absolutely fully recover, Kayla added. Maggie allowed Xander to talk with Sarah first as Fiona tried to be a comfort in the waiting area. Maggie was still stunned by what had transpired. Who would leave someone in the street, bleeding and alone, and not call for help? Maggie asked a guilty-looking Fiona. When Jada came, Kayla requested her to wait a bit to chat to Sarah. Maggie asked Jada if the cops had any leads. Fiona looked worried as she heard Jada tell Maggie that she hoped Sarah could identify the driver of the automobile that had hit her. Fiona continued flashing back to discovering Sarah after the accident. Sarah came to just as Xander went into the room. Xander explained her what had transpired and assured Sarah that she would be okay. When Xander inquired if there was anything Sarah needed, she answered she simply needed him. Xander promised Sarah the honeymoon of her dreams. Sarah was a little frightened when she realized that Bonnie was babysitting Victoria, but she soon dozed off to sleep. Xander left the room to let Sarah sleep, and he spoke with Jada in the waiting area. Jada told Xander that the city cameras didn't have footage of the accident, but she hoped to find footage from local businesses' security cameras. Jada questioned Xander for any information he had about Sarah's whereabouts the night before, so he informed her that Sarah had been going to help Maggie seek for the Horton cabin keys. Xander had gotten anxious when Sarah hadn't returned immediately, and he'd gone seeking for her after Maggie had told him that Sarah had never even made it to the mansion. As Jada and Xander discussed, they learned the driver had still been there when Xander had located Sarah, which had been around 20 minutes after Sarah had left Horton Town Square. They deduced that the driver had tried to aid Sarah but had fled the scene when they'd heard Xander arrive. When Jada said that she was going to see Sarah, Fiona piped in and said she didn't think it was a good idea. Xander questioned Fiona why she wouldn't want the police to question Sarah. Fiona remarked that Sarah had just been through a horrible situation, and it wasn't the right time for her to answer questions. Jada maintained that Sarah's doctor had stated it was fine to interrogate her and that the sooner Jada did it, the more chance they had of identifying the driver. Maggie was sitting with Sarah when Xander and Jada strolled in. Jada asked Sarah what she recalled. Sarah said she'd heard a car coming, so she'd turned to look, but the next thing Sarah recalled, she'd been on the ground. Sarah said she thought the car was gray, but she didn't remember anything else. Kayla arrived just as Xander put warm blankets over Sarah's legs because she complained her body was freezing. However, Sarah was frightened when she discovered she couldn't feel the blankets. As Xander caressed Sarah's legs, she declared she couldn't feel his hands. Sarah also couldn't move her legs. When Kayla checked Sarah's reflexes, Sarah felt nothing. Brady woke up in his building's parking garage, sitting behind the wheel with a headache and not remembering what had happened the night before. He flashed back to drinking at small bar and was frightened to realize he might have driven drunk. Before she arrived to the hospital, Jada was at the scene of the collision and notified a colleague officer that they needed to keep the street closed while the Salem PD completed a reconstruction of the event. When Paulina stopped by, Jada explained the mayor what had transpired and assured her the cops were on it. Jada told Paulina that they didn't have an ID on the driver and that there were no witnesses, but the Salem PD was urging anyone who knew anything to come forward with information. They were also going to use footage from the security cameras. Both women were relieved when Kayla called to inform Jada that Kayla would be okay. Marlena was astonished and excited when she opened her door and found Kristen standing there with Rachel. Kristen added that Rachel had woken up crying and claimed she had to see Brady as soon as possible. I had a nightmare that something bad happened to Daddy, Rachel remarked. Marlena asked Rachel to tell her about the dream, but Rachel claimed she only wanted to see her papa. Marlena suspected Brady was sleeping in his room, so Marlena suggested that she and Rachel make breakfast while they waited for him. After Marlena and Rachel departed into the kitchen, a drowsy Brady strolled in the front door. Brady was astonished to discover Kristen seated there. "Why do you look like a deer caught in the headlights?" Kristen asked. After Brady inquired why Kristen was there, Kristen told him that Rachel wanted to meet him. Brady was thrilled to hear that Rachel was in the kitchen with Marlena but lied to Kristen about what he'd been doing all night. He told Kristen that he had been working all night to cover for Xander. Brady also informed Kristen that Basic Black was making a comeback and would be fresh competition for Gabby Chic. After Brady left the room, Marlena re-entered, looking for Rachel. The little girl finally emerged to tell them that Brady wasn't in his room and hadn't slept in his bed the night before. Kristen told Rachel that where Brady slept was none of her business. Kristen suggested they leave. A rebellious Rachel claimed she wasn't going home until she saw her father. Just then, Brady strolled into the living room. Rachel ran into his arms, relieved that he was okay. Brady told Rachel he had slept in his bed, although he had made the bed as soon as he'd awoken. Rachel didn't buy it, as it had never been Brady's habit, so Kristen attempted shifting the subject. Kristen told Brady that Rachel had had a nightmare that something horrible had happened, so Brady comforted Rachel that he was completely fine. Rachel asked to spend the day with Brady. He was all for it, but Kristen put the kibosh on the idea because she and Rachel already had plans. As Rachel said her goodbyes, she informed Brady that she was relieved he hadn't been smushed by a giant steamroller, which was what she had dreamed about. After Kristen and Rachel left, Marlena told Brady how unhappy Rachel had been when she'd arrived. Marlena told Brady she had also been anxious about him, considering how late he had been arriving home recently. Brady told Marlena that he was all right, so Marlena left the room to give John his medication. Once Brady was alone, he called Fiona with one question. "What the hell happened last night?" Brady inquired. Brady said Fiona he recalled drinking at small bar, but he didn't remember driving home. Fiona reminded him that he had to have driven home if he had woken up in his garage. Fiona lied and said she'd attempted to encourage him to take a cab, but he had insisted he could drive. Fiona wanted to get off the phone, so she told Brady that she couldn't talk because Sarah had been in an accident. After Fiona hung up, Brady heard the sound of a collision in his head. Brady was more worried when Marlena informed Brady specifics about what had occurred to Sarah. In Horton Town Square, Rachel chowed down some baked goodies and acknowledged to Kristen that she'd put Marlena's pancakes in the garbage. "I love Grandma, but she can't even make cereal taste good," Rachel added. When Paulina happened by, she indicated that she was there for a police inquiry. Kristen questioned what had happened. Paulina told Kristen there had been a hit-and-run. Paulina conveyed that Sarah had been hit by a gray automobile and the police assumed that the driver had been drunk. Once Paulina was gone, Rachel added, "Lots of people have gray automobiles. Even Daddy."